Hey y'all, here to talk a little bit about the federal courts and state courts here in Nevada. I'm going to make this pretty quick because of number one, time's running short, and I posted the usual lecture notes, narrated slides, I think a video, a couple of practice quizzes. So there's already plenty of material there. So it's just a little bit of gloss on top of that. Things to say, the big kahuna here is obviously the U.S. Supreme Court, right? And we know that we're thinking in terms of current events. President Trump has prioritized filling the Supreme Court with people of a conservative Republican nature, obviously, right? That's the way the game is played. Trump's mostly been pretty hands-off. He's mostly delegated that job to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Because Trump's really not that interested in the courts per se. I'm not sure he's that interested in government per se in some ways. So he's delegated that to McConnell, Senate Majority Leader, who's taken care to get the right people, so to speak, onto the Supreme Court. Neil Gorsuch and now Brett Kavanaugh. And we know that, McConnell got rid of the filibuster for Supreme Court nominations. Reid had gotten rid of it some years before to help out Obama for lower federal court nominees. So that whole process now is complete. The filibuster in the Senate can no longer be used for federal judicial nominations by a president. So that makes it a lot easier to get people on the court. Right now you need 50 votes plus one. And in Trump's case, right, because Republicans control the Senate, even if they only got, let's say, 50 votes out of the 53 Republicans, which is unlikely but possible, right, they would still have the benefit of the tiebreaker vote from Vice President Mike Pence. So right now, at least, you need at least 50 votes to get somebody on the court. Not that hard to get 50 when you already control 53 seats and you have the tiebreaker. That'll also be the case as Trump fills up those lower federal court vacancies. I think when Obama left, there were over 100 of those lower court vacancies because Republicans in the Senate, who controlled it at that time, denied him not only Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court, but they also denied him roughly 100 additional slots on the lower federal courts. If you want a friend in Washington, get a dog. The elbows are sharp. The stabs in the back are fierce. So that's just the way it goes, especially in this age, right, of hyper-party polarization. All right, so and we know, right, that when Justice Kennedy retired, he was a kind of a moderate Reagan Republican, a Republican from a different era, when the Republican Party wasn't quite so hard to the right. Today, right, the GOP would not be recognizable, I think, to Ronald Reagan. It's a different sort of a party. They've shifted in a rightward direction on a wide variety of issues, so it became very significant, right? On the one hand, you're replacing, right, a Republican with a Republican. What's the big deal? But in this case, we were switching from a moderate Reagan Republican to a Trumpian. Sort of more conservative Republican, Brett Kavanaugh. We know he likes beer, and he likes to take a right-wing position on just about every issue. So that's likely to push the court further to the right. I mean, right now, the configuration, 5 Republicans, 4 Democrats, but those 5 Republicans now are further to the right than they had been before Kennedy retired. So now the big one that the court might be revisiting would be the abortion issue. I don't think they're going to revisit same-sex marriage. I think that's a done deal. Public opinion is so strongly in favor of same-sex marriage that it would make no institutional sense for the court to revisit that and go the other way. And the court, right, does have concern about its institutional legitimacy. I think they often feel, look, if they go too much against public opinion, at some point people will consider them to be illegitimate. Because in a democracy, right, you mostly want the majority to get what they want. So in that sense, I think the court is, especially led by Chief Justice John Roberts, who as Chief Justice does think a lot about the institutional concerns of the court and not just particular policies or particular decisions. He tries to see the bigger picture. And institutionally, I think he's not going to have any interest in revisiting the Obergefell decision from 2015, legalizing same-sex marriage in all 50 states and American territories. But abortion, right, that's a different question. I think the court may well. I'd be surprised if they didn't revisit abortion. So a couple things there. Kavanaugh is clearly pro-life. Yeah, pro-life. Kennedy was willing to compromise in between the pro-life and the pro-choice positions. Kavanaugh seems disinclined to compromise at all, so that could move the court from 5-4 in favor of a woman's right to an abortion to 5-4 against. And on that, public opinion is pretty split, close to 50-50. So I think there the court institutionally would feel more confident revisiting abortion, less confident revisiting same-sex marriage. So look for that. Now there's also some rumblings that Chief Justice John Roberts, concerned again with the court's legitimacy and institutional interests. There was a procedural case that came before the court recently on abortion, and it went in the liberal direction, 5-4, because John Roberts switched sides to join the liberals. It was only procedural and sort of an intermediate appellate situation, so hard to say too much definitively about that. But it's at least suggestive that Roberts, if Kavanaugh wants to revisit Roe and the court revisits Roe, there's a chance. I don't know how much of a chance I'd give it, but it'd be interesting if the Las Vegas bookies take bets on this. I think there's a chance that Roberts could vote to preserve the compromise on abortion worked out in Casey in 1992, right? That said, well, Roe v. Wade in 1973 went too far, but we also don't want to cleanly overturn it, and so Casey was the court's decision that essentially cut a middle way in between the two sides, pro-life and pro-choice. That's the delicate compromise that's been in place since 1992, supported by Anthony Kennedy. Kennedy's off the court, Kavanaugh's on the court. I don't think he's going to be comfortable with a compromise, but because Roberts, I think, is concerned, right, that just switching one justice could shift their jurisprudence on a major and deeply contentious issue, Roberts might vote. I don't know. Might vote to preserve the compromise made back in 1992. That'd be fascinating to see. Either way that it goes, it'd be fascinating to see. Yeah. Okay. That's more than enough, right? Lower federal courts also very important. So don't underestimate the ongoing significance of the lower federal courts. A lot of the pushback against Trump has come from the lower federal courts because it takes so long for an issue to reach the Supreme Court in most cases. One to watch for, though, on that front, Trump has directed the Census Bureau to ask a question this upcoming 10-year census in 2020 on citizenship. So far, lower federal courts have blocked that as Trump did not give a good reason other than he wants to be harsh on immigrants and undocumented people. The court said essentially that doesn't really constitute due process of law. And I think it's on appeal to the Supreme Court on an expedited basis. I think they're taking it. I think they're arguing it very shortly. And then I think they're going to be looking to issue a decision, I believe, by midsummer at the latest, maybe June. Because, right, the Census Bureau is going to need to know what the dang form is going to look like so they can start publishing and printing it and then doing the census in 2020. So I think the court's taking that on an expedited basis. They'll do that from time to time in cases like that. And then, very quickly, the Nevada courts, right? The big issue here, and I think I covered that more than adequately in both the notes and the slides. Please watch that Justice for Sale video. Super good and depressing. We have nonpartisan elections for our state courts, Supreme Court on down. And, some say that's the way to go. Most states do it that way, so Nevada fits right into the mainstream. But it's also true, right, that these tend to be low information elections. We, the people, including myself, a political scientist, often don't know that much about the judicial candidates, a concern that may not be the single best way to choose state judges and justices. And they're nonpartisan, right, which takes away a crucial piece of information for most of us, because judges and justices are really just like the rest of us. They just wear fancy robes and stuff that makes them look cool. But they're, some of them are Democrats, some of them are Republicans, and some of them are somewhere in between. It would help, I think, if we, the people, could know that before they cast their vote on election day. But we're, like in many states, where we are denied that information, right? Because the idea is, if they don't have a party label, that means that they're above politics and they're neutral. Come on, man. Nothing that we know about humans supports that sort of a claim. So if I had my druthers, I guess at the very least we would switch to partisan judicial elections. That's the way they do it back in my the state that I grew up in, Pennsylvania, they do it old school, and that was the old school way to do it. And that's why the East Coast states are more likely to do it that way. That was old school from the beginning. Yeah, you have elections, but you make them partisan because that's just real. As America grew west, and it was a later moment in our history, right? The mid-19th century or so, you're beginning to get this progressive movement, especially as you get into the late 19th century, early 20th century, that said judges should be above politics. Well, maybe they should be. I don't know. That's beyond my pay grade to answer that question. I'm just saying, man, they are political and they are partisan, just like the rest of us. But at the time when elections for courts were being established in the western states, the trend was towards nonpartisan because it represented that aspiration. So, yeah, and so right, it raises those issues, nonpartisan elections. And finally, right, it means that judges and justices need to raise money for their campaigns, just like anybody running for any other body that's executive or legislative. And the argument, right, is it's not cool to have judges and justices out on the campaign trail raising money from, most obviously and most typically, right, law firms and large corporations that have a vested interest in who's on state courts. And of course, right, since Citizens United in 2009, that Supreme Court case, the money flowing into politics in general has accelerated with rapidity, and that acceleration has included money flowing into state judicial races in Nevada and in every other state where they have that. I mean, the alternative methods of selection for state court judges and justices is also not fabulous, right? No method is perfect, so you're not comparing elections that are nonpartisan to some mythical perfect alternative. I'm not saying that at all. But there are other methods that are a little bit more focused on merit, although there's some critiques of that as well. And is that just another name for giving the power elite in a state more of a role than we the people? Blah blah blah. So deep literature on that we don't need to go into here. But just recognize that there is an interesting and important debate about should states like Nevada and many other states, should they be electing their state judges and justices? What are the issues there? And finally, should we make them partisan if we're going to have the elections or not? And then one other one. Oh yeah, Sandra Day O'Connor, right, long since retired from the Supreme Court. She always felt now that she left too early. She has beaten the drum for many years for public funding of state judicial elections. She opposes state judicial elections, period, but says if we're going to have them, they should be funded not through contributions from law firms and corporations, but they should be funded by the public, so that you don't create conflicts of interest for judges and justices to get on the bench and might feel like they owe their campaign benefactors something back in return. So public funding. But you could imagine, right, politically there is no real appetite among we the people to send their tax dollars to fund judicial races at the state level. So it's an interesting idea, but it's going absolutely nowhere. All right, thanks all. Hang in there. We're accelerating here as we move towards the end of the semester. Hang in there. It's going to be a little bit of a bumpy ride, but I think we can get this done in plausible fashion. Thanks.